chair members of the board, that's Mike. That's right.
Everybody ready?
All right, let's get going.
Call this meeting of James City County Board of Supervisors to order. Mr. Stevens, would you call the roll, please, sir?
Ms. Sadler?
Here.
Ms. Sadler represents the Stonehouse District and is vice chair of the board. Mr. Eisenhower?
Here.
Mr. Eisenhower represents the Jamestown District. Ms. Larson?
Here.
Ms. Larson represents the Berkeley District. Mr. McGlinnan?
Here.
Mr. McGlinnan represents the Roberts District. Mr. Hipple?
Here.
Mr. Hipple represents the Powhatan District and is chair of the board. Sitting to my right, far right, is Adam Kinsman, County Attorney, and I'm Scott Stevens, County Administrator, and it's my pleasure to be clerk of the board. Mr. Chair.
Thank you, sir. All right, we're having a little bit of difficulty with our communications tonight, so we just want to make sure that the public, we're recording this in a different way than we normally do. That's why we started a little bit late in order to get that, make sure that we're recorded. And you can find us on
Facebook and YouTube.
Facebook and YouTube right now, and then we'll put this out on the channels later when we get it on out there. We're gonna go ahead with a moment of silence and a pledge, and I'm gonna ask Mr. Getty, would you lead us in the pledge tonight and have a moment of silence first and lead us in the pledge?
Pledge allegiance
To the
flag
flag
of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Mr. Getty? Thank you, sir. Appreciate that.
Good job.
Got a little surprise for you there. All right, next we'll move into public comment. Our first public comment speaker is Daniel Robels Hinckley. Hope I pronounced that correctly.
Good evening.
Good evening.
My name is Daniel Robles, and I live in Powhatan Secondary. I have been attending online school since the beginning of the pandemic. The experience has been pretty good, except for one major problem, and that is poor internet connection. My internet service provider, like most of the county, is Cox. For years, my neighborhood has, in many parts of James City County, have had slow and spotty internet connection despite numerous complaints. I personally have contacted Cox over 100 times in the past year. My neighbors have also called numerous times to no avail. We have had Cox service teams on our street multiple times this year. After speaking with my friends from all over the county about their experiences with Cox internet, we have all been dropped from Zoom calls while trying to attend online school. During these conversations, we attempt to play games such as Minecraft or Valorant, which we are unable to do due to the high latency and ping. My parents have also been kicked from watching TV shows such as the news or ABC while I am trying to talk to my friends on Discord. I have also learned that in areas in James City County, there are alternative ISPs, which are internet service providers, such as Verizon Fios. Verizon Fios is completely fiber optic internet, which boasts low latency and high speed. It is extremely affordable. Communities around us, such as Suffolk, Hampton, Newport News, and Richmond, all have Verizon Fios and Cox. This allows people to choose their ISP and for pricing to be more competitive. Through my research, I have learned that for true gigabit internet, Verizon Fios charges $80 per month, while for what Cox calls gigabit, which is actually 940 megabit download and only 35 upload, it is $136 per month. That does not include service fees. With Verizon, the service fees are baked into the cost of $80, and Verizon speeds are 10 times faster for that $80 than Cox. There are conflicting stories of why Cox has a monopoly in our area, And with that monopoly, Cox is undeterred to improve prices or performance. My question to the board is, why does Cox have this monopoly, and how long will it take for our county to be brought up to the 21st century? Thank you.
Thank you. And Daniel, normally, I appreciate you speaking. Normally, we don't, during public comment, we don't comment back. It gives a chance for the public. But we have been working very hard on this board, and the county is open to anyone who will provide. It's getting somebody to come in here to provide, since Cox has so much out there, that's keeping the other companies wanting to come in and invest. But our county is open to anyone that will provide that service, and we're looking at broadband as well. So we're trying to move that ahead. We've been working very hard during the pandemic to make sure that our students, all that weren't connected, were connected, even if it was with Cox, at least to get something out of it. But I appreciate your comments, and thank you for coming today to speak to us. And
Thank you.
we'll keep in touch with you. Thank you. All right, our next speaker is Peg Woolman. No trash.
Good afternoon. Thank you, Chairman Hippel,
Thank
members, ladies and gentlemen of the board, Mr. Stevens, Mr. Carfax, Mr. Kinsman. I'm Peg Borman, and I live at 17 Settlers Lane, and I'm here to talk a little bit of trash. I'm happy to tell you that if I've driven the main roads and the back roads of our county lately, I'm thrilled that the number of trash is down. And I think it's thanks to the good contractors at DDOT and county, whoever's doing it, they're doing a good job. But there is still a lot of it out there waiting for our volunteers to pick it all up this weekend. We have a great category of folks coming to be out there on Saturday the 17th, and organizations as well as individuals, and families are coming out. And we've got several from the county administrators are coming out. And I hope that all of you all and anybody that's listening will come out and help us too. But it still appalls me that people are so callous that they just keep tossing that stuff out of the windows as they go down the highway. Do they not have any pride in our county, or do they just want to see if somebody will pick it up if they toss it out there? Or do they think it's not their problem or responsibility? And I want to say, remember that also cigarette butts are litter. I want to give a shout out to all the volunteers that were out on the weekend of March the 26th and 27th during the Great American Cleanup. They made a huge dent in the amount of litter and trash in some of the parks and the roadways. That group, also the groups that have adopted a highway, several of them have been out cleaning. I've called a lot of those also. Because every litter bit hurts, but everybody picking up litter helps. I thank you for your outstanding support for our Clean County Commission. It really makes our job much easier and much more productive when we know that we're supported so well. I just want to alert everybody to the fact that there will be volunteers on the side of the roads with those orange bags and those vests picking up that trash. And I want to thank all of them in advance, and thank you for taking the time to hear me about my trash talk.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, that's all we have under public comment. We have nothing on consent calendar for tonight. Next, we'll move into a public hearing. And our first public hearing is public hearing on fiscal year 2022 James City County budget. Ms. Sharon Day, welcome.
Slideshow. Up at the top. Good afternoon, Chairman, members of the board. Before we open up the public hearing on the fiscal year 22 proposed budget, I'd like to provide a brief COVID-19 update in financial terms, as well as present a few details from the fiscal year 22 proposed budget. 22 budget process included considerations to adjust for the impacts of COVID-19 on our local economy. The fiscal year 21 adopted budget addressed anticipated revenue shortfalls through reductions to expenditures, as well as measures to help conserve cash flow. The 22 plan assumed that there would be an economic recovery and we would return to normal. During this year, we monitored our assumptions and we've made adjustments to the 22 proposed budget based on what our actual experience has been. And we do anticipate making more adjustments as additional information is received. The county does have a 2-year budget cycle. Fiscal year 2022 is the second year of that biennial budget, and it continues to incorporate the strategic plan goals and the operating initiatives. A few highlights from the fiscal year 22 proposed budget. The county does have 8 separate funds. The total of those 8 separate funds for fiscal year 2022 is $224.4 million. That reflects a $15.7 million increase, or 7.5%, over the current year, fiscal year 21 budget. But it reflects a $10.2 million, or 4.3% reduction from the fiscal year 2022 plan. It incorporates the addition of 12 positions out of a total of 30 positions that were requested. It also includes a 3% general wage increase to our employees effective October 1st, as well as sharing in an overall 3% average health insurance increase, which would be split between the county as well as the employees. One significant change I did want to mention to our budget this year relates to JCSA. Due to some structural changes in the entity, as well as the fact that JCSA is fiscally independent of the county, JCSA did present its budget in a separate document for fiscal year 2022. Our CIP revenues and expenditures were reduced significantly in fiscal year 2021 because of the economic impacts of COVID-19. In 2022, we anticipate a normalization of our projects and have included funding accordingly. Sales tax for education change is also being made. Previously, the sales tax for education came to the county first, and then the county passed that funding on to the school division. However, we've made a change for fiscal year 22 so that those dollars no longer come to the county, they would go directly to the school division. And we recommended making that change based on research on how other localities and other school districts throughout the state handle that same revenue source. I had mentioned previously that the county has 8 total separate funds. Our general fund is our main operating fund. It's also the largest of all of those 8 funds. Our capital projects fund is our second most significant fund, and it includes projects not only for the county, but also for our school division. Our debt service fund also relates to capital. It reflects the principal and interest payments that we make on borrowings, which we made in the past for previous projects. And then the 5 remaining funds are what we accountants refer to as special revenue funds. And what that means is most of their funding comes from outside sources. So most of their funding are federal and state grants, and it's restricted for specific programs. A good example of that, if you look in the middle of the screen where we show the Virginia Public Assistance Fund, that's fancy terminology for our social services department. And the majority of their funding are federal and state grants. I also wanted to draw attention to the interfund transfers line, which is the bottom line, and it shows a reduction. And what that represents is a duplication of expenditures. So, for example, we have certain revenue sources that come to the county, such as our lodging tax. It's deposited into our general fund, but it's restricted by the Code of Virginia to be used 60% for tourism. So the money comes to the general fund, 60% of it goes out as an expenditure. It then comes into our tourism investment fund and out as an expenditure again as it's being paid for various tourism related projects. So that line is a reduction to eliminate that duplication. It's really only one revenue source that's being shifted to 2 different places. For our operating fund, a few general fund highlights. The fiscal year 2022 proposed budget is $202 million. That reflects a $6 million or a 3.1% increase over the current year's budget. And again, it reflects a reduction, $16.8 million for 7.7% from the 22 plan, which was established about this time last year. It proposes no change in the real estate tax rate. It does propose the implementation of a new cigarette tax and allocates that funding fully to our capital improvements program. It includes 8.5 new positions effective July the 1st. And again, the estimated cost to provide services did exceed our revenue projection. The needs were greater than the resources. We had about $900,000 of requests, primarily personnel that we were not able to support in this budget. In terms of those 8.5 new positions, this just shows where those positions are actually being proposed. For the first one, we have one position being proposed in the voter registration office. We have 2 positions being proposed in the police department. We have an upgrade in a position in our treasurer's office to help with our DMV select services, which also does provide revenue to the county. We have 1 position in community development for a planner position that would support transportation. We have 4 different positions in general services for various needs, including capital projects. Again, here at the county, general services manages its own projects. We do not outsource that to contractors because it's more cost effective to do it in-house. Focusing in a little bit on the revenue side of the general fund, this is just a summary of the various sources of the county's revenue. The largest component, of course, is general property tax. That reflects real estate taxes as well as personal property taxes. I did want to mention or draw attention to the other local taxes. This is the area that we definitely felt the greatest impact from COVID-19. Most of the revenue sources here are tourism driven. It includes items such as the sales tax, the 1% additional, historic triangle tax, also our meals tax and our lodging tax. And as you can see in fiscal year 21, that number was greatly reduced to a little under $20 million. We're not quite back to normal, which would be closer to $30 million. We are proposing and projecting that we'll be somewhere closer to in between at 26.7. I also wanted to draw attention to the state and federal resources. If you look at where we are in 21 as well as the plan for 22, it looks like we're taking a significant reduction there. But what that really reflects is that change in accounting for the sales tax for education. Again, we've removed that from our budget and it will go directly to the school division going forward. Under our general property taxes, again, in fiscal year 2021, as a result of COVID, we had assumed that we potentially could experience lower tax collections. We also anticipated fewer home improvements and possibly a decline in new vehicle purchases. I did want to mention fiscal year 22 is a non-real estate reassessment year, so any additional revenue there would be from new construction, renovations, items of that nature. We are projecting an increase in our Public Service Corporation tax, and that is a result of the Skips Creek connector being operational now. And other local taxes, we're anticipating increases in our sales and lodging taxes as the economy does start to recover. We have made adjustments to our meals tax revenue. This is an area where we were hit harder than we had originally projected, so we've made adjustments for that accordingly. Again, as we've done in the past, the historic triangle additional 1% sales tax is entirely allocated to CIP. And the new cigarette tax, estimated at approximately $900,000, is also proposed to be allocated entirely to CIP. For licenses, permits, and fees, we do have some recovery that's been programmed into this budget, specifically into building permits and business licenses. I did want to mention our business licenses, we receive a year in arrears. So what we collect in fiscal year 22 will really be based on gross receipts this year. So we're expecting that we will not see the pre-COVID level, then most likely be 2023 before we see that. We do have a full year revenue program for development and stormwater fees. There were some new fees that were implemented in January of this year. So we only had 6 months of revenue projected for fiscal year 2021. We have a full 12 months projected for fiscal year 2022. In terms of the revenue that we receive from the state, we've included the revenue from the state for the compensation board related to a mandatory 5% raise. for our constitutional officers, which would be effective July 1st. And then again, just the removal of that sales tax for education from the county's budget. In terms of our charges for services, our recycling program, again, is still relatively new to the county. We're 2 or 3 years in at this point, and we continue to make adjustments in the budget based on the current level of participation. However, there's no change in the fee itself that's being proposed. In terms of the convenience center fees, we have seen an uptick in the activity there, so we've built in an increase in revenue. Again, no changes in the fees themselves. And then we have some minor increases in certain park-related fees, specifically bike rentals, parking, camping, and boat slips. In terms of the county's fund balance for the general fund, we are not proposing to use any of our fund balance for ongoing operational needs. We are proposing to allocate $5.8 million to capital improvements. That includes $4 million from leftover funds from last year. Last year, for the last quarter of last year, as well as fiscal year 2021, our CIP was basically on hold. There's very, very few projects, mainly maintenance and safety projects, that are included. So this would really just restore some funding to some projects that had been in the plan, but that had been removed because of the pandemic. All right, moving on to the expenditure side of the budget. Here, we just wanted to demonstrate where the various funding is allocated between all the county's departments. Again, here, I wanted to draw attention to the contribution to the James City County School Division. If you look across those 3 columns, it may look as though we are reducing our funding to the school division. And I wanted to clarify that, again, that is related to that sales tax for education going directly to the schools as opposed to channeling through. Our actual local contribution to the school division in 2022 is proposed to be $1.4 million higher than it is currently. Looking at the numbers a different way, just looking at a dollar and how that dollar is allocated. The biggest portion of our budget goes to the school division. About 50 cents of every dollar goes to the school division, and about 15 cents of every dollar goes to public safety, namely fire and police. So if you add those two together, about 65 cents of every dollar is for those 2 functions, and 35 cents goes to everything else. We also wanted to demonstrate what an average homeowner pays. The average assessed value of a home here in James City County is $338,000. We're at an 84 cents tax rate for every $100 of assessed value. So that equates to about $2,800 in taxes. And again, we listed the largest dollars first, contribution to the school division, and then public safety, and you can see where the balance is allocated. We also just want to show a few examples on how we incorporate the strategic plan goals into the budget itself. I'm going to skip number 1. That first goal related to water supply will be covered by Mr. Powell as part of his JCSA budget presentation later tonight. So in terms of modern infrastructure, facilities, and technology, again, this is the biggest area in fiscal year 2021 that was affected by the pandemic. Again, our CIP was really put on hold, and we really just focused on some safety issues and some critical needs. As revenues are anticipated to improve next year, we have included funding for various drainage, water quality, watershed projects. We also have a water facility replacement at Chickahominy Riverfront Park proposed, and the construction of Grove Center Convenience Center is included. In terms of enhancing our community character, we've included transportation funding of $1.75 million. That does reflect a $250,000 additional investment above our typical annual commitment. $100,000 of that 1.75 is being utilized to fund that new transportation position that I mentioned earlier in community development. In terms of our local economy, here again, tourism is a major focus, as well as the projects that have been identified in the Shaping Our Shores Master Plan. Specifically, there are various projects that have been allocated to the Jamestown Beach Event Park, as well as the James City County Marina. Also, to address some of the recreational needs at the southern end of the county, there's also funding that's been proposed in the 5-year plan to construct a new Lower County Park. And we have improvements planned at the Warhill Sports Complex, specifically to basketball courts and baseball fields. In the area of public services, for the fire department, we've included funding for the replacement of various fire apparatus, both in fiscal year 22, as well as the additional 4 years. And for the police department, we've included funding for the expansion of a firing range, replacement of their interview room system, and funding for some covered parking, as well as a driver simulator. For the school system, we have a significant investment, about $7.5 million in fiscal year 22 alone. That includes various refurbishment projects at middle and high schools. And then future funding includes the expansion of all 3 of our high schools, and also refurbishments, turf replacements, and various HVAC replacements at several schools. Just recapping the fiscally efficient government, again, fiscal year 21 presented quite a few challenges for us. The county did adapt to several new safety measures so we could prevent the spread of the COVID-19 pandemic. Again, our departments had to provide exceptional services with reduced funding. A hiring freeze was started in fiscal year 20, and it remained in place through December of this year. Fund balance was used to restore funding for certain very specific critical expenditures. We maintained the effective use of CARES and other relief funding, which helped us combat the virus and provide support to local businesses, several of our nonprofit partners, as well as the school division. We also worked with the Virginia Department of Health, the City of Williamsburg, and York County to establish a vaccination center at the Colonial Williamsburg Visitor Center, where we were able to assist with administration of the vaccine to employees as well as the general public. So moving forward in 2022 with the distribution of the vaccine and again an anticipated economic recovery, at least partially, we've incorporated a 3% cost of living increase for employees effective October 1st. We have several new positions that have been built in to meet the needs of our departments and citizens. We have funding to share in the cost of the health insurance increase, and we've restored funding to our capital improvement program. I wanted to go over the future meetings to provide feedback on the budget. We have a public hearing, of course, tonight. We also have a business meeting on April 27th at 1 p.m. And we have our regular meeting where we're scheduled to adopt the budget on May 11th at 5 p.m. Those meetings will take place at the same location in the government complex. And then I wanted to take an opportunity just to mention a few of the enhancements that we made this year to our budget document, which we're very proud of. And a lot of these things come from feedback that we receive from the public on our document itself. The first thing we did, we worked with the communications department to do a complete cosmetic overhaul, really just to modernize the document, make it more useful, make it more user-friendly, make it make sense to the average reader, and incorporate some best practices from various sources that we use as guidance. Our capital section also now includes not only projects in our 5-year plan, but we've included a summary of all of our projects that are ongoing. So all of the projects that you've approved in previous budgets are now included in our capital section. And we did that because we realized that we come to you throughout the year and we ask for you to authorize certain contracts or maybe accept certain grants, and they're related to those projects. So we wanted to pull it together so the public can really see that. We've also included an appendix for various taxes and fees, so you can see what the specific taxes are that we charge and what the fees are that are used to support the county's programs. Right now, it's always a point in time, so those are the taxes and fees as of today when we produce the document, but we'll continue to keep that information current on the county's website. I also wanted to mention that the document itself is available for viewing on the county's website. The document includes very high-level summary, but it also includes the line-by-line detail for each department as well. And that concludes my remarks. Just as a reminder, following the presentation, there is a public hearing to invite public comment on the fiscal year 22 proposed budget.
Thank you. Questions?
The only question that I did have was I saw the section about how many positions had been requested and then how many were able to be put into the budget. And I just wondered if you could talk about that process, or maybe Mr. Stevens could a little bit, because a couple of those lines were really significant that we weren't able to fund, so.
You know, Ms. Larson, I think that's always a challenge. We do ask departments to submit requests. HR sort of vets the request to see if they believe it's a valid request. In this case, most of the department's requests were considered valid, and then we have those discussions with departments. With Ms. Day and I do with our departmental meetings and just try to prioritize. And we ask the departments for their priority rating, and we try to rate them as a county, what we believe the ranking should be. And then we look to what our recurring funds are. And I think I've shared before that I shared a number that over the last 4 or 5 years, the departments have requested many more positions than we've had recurring funds to fund. And so that's an ongoing challenge as we're trying to do more and the community continues to grow, the revenues aren't keeping up. And we're okay this year. I don't think there's a need to do any more than the cigarette tax that we were proposing, but that is an ongoing challenge for us with the operational kinds of costs. So we do try to have department rankings. We try to rank them for the county as overall. We take the department's input and we come back to you with what we believe we can afford in terms of revenues that are projected. Was there anything to add to that process?
I think that's a great synopsis. I would just add, it's about a 5-month process. We actually start that in the fall. We have various meetings with the departments, and we have some forms and some documentation they must submit, but there's quite a bit of time that's spent in the workload indicators. We require the departments to actually support their requests with true data so that we can see what type of work they're doing. It also helps HR assess whether or not there's any duplication of effort happening between the departments. And we also benchmark ourselves to comparable localities as well in terms of, you know, maybe the number of people per permit, you know, that type of thing. So it's a pretty strenuous process.
So I appreciate the fact they sounds like there's also some efficiency checking going on. If HR is saying, wait a minute, you know, you've got so-and-so doing this as well, and what can we do to streamline? So, okay, it just, when you see that, I think public safety had requested 9, I may have that number wrong, and we're able to get 2. You know, that's hard. Same for general services. I know they're working very hard. So, and I guess, if they find that this is just not cutting it, I take it they come back to you and say, this isn't cutting it, you're gonna have to.
The answer is yes. The departments and I have ongoing dialogue, and I've encouraged them to be an advocate for the department. If there's an area that happens mid-year and we need to do something to adjust, we would bring that recommendation back to you if we needed to incorporate that. Many of these positions are some that they asked for in years previous that didn't get funded, so some of those have been carryover positions. On the public safety side, did they include the firefighters?
Yes, they do.
There were 6 positions in public safety that we didn't recommend for funding because I believe there's an opportunity for a grant that would let us consider that at a later time. So that number, that is what the department requested, so that's why you're seeing 9, but 6 of them were removed, believing we will get funding at a later time and not have to be part of this budget process that I think is a 3-year grant for those positions. So it's not quite as bad for public safety. They didn't get all they asked for, but it's better than requesting 9 and getting 2 or 3.
Okay, thank you so much.
Yes,
Can I ask how the loss of positions or the not backfilling positions during the COVID affects this? In other words, what you're talking about here is just new positions, not just positions that are necessarily vacant right now that we just haven't had the resources to fill. Is that correct?
Yes, sir. These are, if we had 1,000 or whatever number of positions previously, these are in addition to those. So those that were vacant and not filled during the hiring freeze, departments are working to refill or fill those positions. They're included in the budget. These would be additional authorized positions.
Okay, so this is not like we're trying to, we are making up some of it based on what we lost over time period for COVID, but this is true new positions on top of that.
Correct. Our staffing may still be short because we haven't filled all of those positions as of yet, but we do have funding in the budget recommended to fill those positions that existed this time last year.
Thank you.
Sharon, I'm sorry,
Oh, yeah, go right ahead.
if I could, just a couple questions, and maybe not even the answers tonight, maybe at our work session. First of all, the federal funding, I don't know where we are lined up with the CARES money or the new funding that's coming down. I'm not even sure what it's called, and where we'll be landing with that and what we're able to use it for. That's something that I'm interested in finding out. Also, in terms of the cigarette tax, we were talking about data earlier. I'd be interested in finding out how a cigarette tax could potentially impact our BPOL numbers. I do know just from some information that I looked into that even from other states who implemented the cigarette taxes, that their BPOL numbers took a hit. And that, and I'd be interested in knowing if whatever research you could find out what types of businesses that could potentially impact. So I guess I'm looking for how we could figure out if this is gonna balance out or not. If we're gonna take a big enough hit by not doing it, is it worth doing it and putting a burden on citizens because of it? So any information from that would be very helpful.
Absolutely. For the cigarette tax, it would probably be a collaborative effort between my department and the Commissioner of Revenue.
Okay.
He'll be the one that would actually assess that tax, and I know that he is a member of an association as I am. We can certainly reach out to our counterparts and bring back additional information. In terms of the American Rescue Plan, I assume that was the additional funding for COVID you were referring to. I do anticipate having a more thorough update for you at the April 27th business meeting. We're still waiting on a lot of guidance. I can certainly share what I know as of today. Our share of the $1.9 trillion package is about $14.8 million. It'll be paid out in 2 installments. We do expect our first installment to be received before the end of this fiscal year. So most likely sometime end of May, first part of June. We assume it will be a 50-50 allocation, and if that's the case, it would be about $7 million that we would receive this year. The funds you have until December 31st, 2024 to spend those dollars. The second installment is to be received 1 year after the first installment is received. So we'll get some this year and probably again this time next year. In terms of how we can spend it, there's 6 or 7 categories that the total package allows you to spend it on. There's a lot of gray on whether or not localities will be able to use it for all of those purposes, or most of the money will be to the states, and then the states will allocate it. What I know as of today is that we can use it for revenue replacement at a local level. It will be based on our last full fiscal year prior to the pandemic. So for us, that would be fiscal year 2019. What I would propose that we target would be mainly those tourism-related revenues, because that is where we saw the biggest hit, and we can certainly tie that directly to the pandemic. One of the questions I have is if we were to use it, let's say for the loss of revenue for lodging tax, would it be restricted for tourism? Because normal lodging tax is. So there's a lot of questions there. We certainly can also use it for any directly related COVID-19 expenditures, just as we have been for disinfectant, PPE, vaccination efforts, items of that nature. We can use it to provide assistance, again, to nonprofits, small businesses, hard-hit industries, and economic recovery. We can also use it for investments in water and sewer and broadband infrastructure. So one of the questions we have is, of our $14.8 million of the uses, is it going to come in buckets? Of our $14.8 million, this much is allocated for this purpose, revenue replacement, say. Or is it, you can use it for any of those purposes very broadly. What happened with CARES was we received the money, and it was almost a year later before we got those details. So our approach to this was very conservative, and it paid off that we did that. There were a lot of localities, because they didn't have the guidance, that used it for things that were labeled, later determined to be ineligible. I hope that we get the guidance sooner this time. It did come out in piecemeal, sometimes contradictory. So I know that the Treasury, who is responsible for this, is working on that guidance. We just don't know when we will receive it.
As a follow-up, is the schools getting some money as well, or?
Yes, and it does not appear that that would be part of our $14.8 million, that they will receive their own dollars, most likely directly from the state as an allocation.
Okay, thank you.
And I just wonder if at the work session, we could talk a little bit about how we actually utilize the CARES money this year and what impact that had on our revenues, and how it translates into this coming year's budget. I think that would be helpful to
Absolutely.
understand.
Any other questions? All right, thank you. All right, we'll go ahead and carried. And our first public speaker will be Jason Rezoning. Am I pronouncing that right, or have I messed it up totally?
That's good enough. Perfect.
I'm sorry.
That's perfect. Thank you. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Jason Rezoning. I've been asked to represent a local company, Land Communion Distributors. A little bit about them. They're a Virginia licensed wholesale provider of over 10,000 items, including cigarettes, that you would find in typical convenience stores or tobacco outlet. We have over 1,000 retail locations, Virginia, North Carolina, South Carolina, and we've been in business since 1875. I'm basically here today to speak in opposition against the James City increase cigarette tax. We believe it's going to cost more money than it's actually going to generate. We also have 3 retail operations here in James City County. We chose those in James City County due to the attractive low cigarette taxes. Our cigarette sales in 2020 were down by almost 21% due to COVID and the state doubling the cigarette tax from $3 to $6. Cigarette customers, like gasoline customers, will drive to save, and many of our tourists that shop at our stores are now waiting to make their purchases until they get to North Carolina, where the tax is only $4.50. Adding another $4 a carton with the proposed county cigarette tax will drive sales a bit further to neighboring counties, like York County or to other nearby counties that have not added a county tax. If they're willing to drive, from New York City to Virginia, they're definitely willing to drive the county over. It will also move customers to neighboring North Carolina, where the tax is already lower than Virginia. The county will also lose a portion of the 7% sales tax that's collected on all other sales from stores and other stores we supply in the county. The COVID pandemic has caused financial hardships for retailers that have worked very hard to remain open for their customers. We're still feeling the effects of Busch Gardens being closed or open with limited access, along with Colonial Williamsburg. The timing for this proposed county tax cannot be worse. The additional loss of sales will translate into lost jobs and likely store closures. James City County will be receiving $14.84 million in federal government stimulus funds under President Biden's $1.9 trillion American Rescue Plan stimulus law. These funds could be used to eliminate the needs to increase the cigarette taxes on James City County businesses and residents. Local cigarette and tobacco taxes often cause adult customers to either travel to nearby communities or purchase some of these products online just to avoid local tax. In addition, it's often purchased in conjunction with gasoline, food, beverages, and other items by adult customers, driving all of these purchases outside local jurisdictions because of high cigarette or tobacco taxes not only causes harm to local tax-paying businesses, but also our local tax revenues suffer as well. The cigarette and tobacco taxes encourage development and growth of illicit markets where underage compliance goes unchecked and government derive no revenue. One big example is New York City's high cigarette tax is the reason estimated 60% or more of their tobacco sales occur outside legal channels. As a result of the illicit market, the city loses as much as $900 million per year in revenue, according to the Tax Foundation. With tobacco stores dependent on the sales of the products for virtually all of their profits, and with convenience stores relying on tobacco sales for almost 40% of in-store sales, a downturn in cigarette and tobacco tax would result in employee layoffs and store closures. As a wholesaler of cigarettes, we also stamp and do the state's work of purchasing stamps, applying them to packs of cigarettes with machines that cost over $100,000, labor, accounts receivable increases, and collection from retailers. Is James City County prepared to pay wholesalers for the service if they were to adopt a tax? Is the county prepared to enforce and audit the tax being paid by local retailers in the county to ensure packs are properly stamped? You'll be invited cigarette trafficking from lower tax areas into a higher tax areas to increase taxes. Please vote no on this proposal for adding $4 per carton tax in James City County. We believe it costs more than it should. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. All right. Our next public speaker, Jay Everson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, sir.
Jay Everson, 6923 Chancery Lane, Colonial Heritage. On the 15 cents used for public safety, I just want to compliment the public safety people who were at the visitor center for the vaccination. That was just incredible, in and out. I never seen anything like it. The reason I came here today was to support the Lafayette renovations, which will, of course, increase the capacity of Lafayette by 200 kids. And as you are well aware, Lafayette's enrollment is such that it's been moved down in the sports leagues from Hill and Jamestown. And I support that along with the Hill Auxiliary Gym. Great plans, all in favor. However, there is one, though I know it's not funded this year, but our school board, once you have something on the capital improvement plan, it just never seems to like go away, and that would be the Jamestown renovation of the cafeteria, which is being driven by the fact they're 104% enrollment. With the 200 more capacity at Lafayette, there is really no reason why we should spend any money to address the overcapacity of Jamestown when it's simple redistricting, basically on all the plans that they had when they did this a few years back. Basically take Powhatan Secondary, put them in Lafayette, problem solved, and you can save almost about $3 million. I know people are loath to take stuff off the list, but you took off the elementary school, God bless you all, and it's time, I think, to take Jamestown cafeteria expansion out, to let the school board know that we're not spending money because they choose not to make the tough decision to redistrict. And I thank you for your time.
Thank you. All right, that's all our speaker cards, so I'll go ahead and close that public hearing, and there's nothing that needs action today on that. That will come in a couple of meetings. Next, the adoption of the government ordinance. Mr. King, welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. It's hard to believe it's been almost a complete calendar year since I first came before you, and I think it was April 14, 2020, recommending that you adopt a continuity of government ordinance. For those in the audience or viewing public that want to know what a continuity of government ordinance is, it is basically a standalone ordinance that lets the county operate a little bit outside of the bounds of what would normally be required of us in the Virginia Code, most specifically allowing the board and its subservient commissions and boards to operate via Zoom or electronic only. These ordinances are only effective for 6 months. I do note that after July 1 of this year, it can be effective for 12 months, but we're not there yet. So you've adopted your original ordinance, you adopted a new one in September 8th of 2020, and that's good until April 14 of 2021. You still have a couple of commissions, mainly the Planning Commission and the Economic Development Authority, that are operating virtually, and we still make use of some of the additional times that are granted to us in the continuity of government ordinance. So what I did is stripped out those sections that we weren't using and sort of made it a continuity light ordinance. Recommend that you adopt this for another 6 months, and then we'll be back before you to see, hopefully when we do it again, and it'll all be over with. So I recommend that you adopt the attached ordinance. I'm happy to answer any questions you might have.
Questions?
I'm sorry. The only question I had, you said, I'm sorry, Planning Commission and...
I believe Economic Development Authority is still doing
Okay.
complete
Do you
virtual
know
meetings.
how much long, have they said how much longer they plan to meet virtually, or?
Not that
Okay.
I know of, ma'am.
All right, thank you. Has everyone been given an opportunity to be vaccinated on those boards? Do you know?
I don't. I'll look at the county administrator for that one, probably.
Ms. Lawson, I think many of them have had an opportunity. I don't know that we specifically have reached out to all of our boards and commissions, but as we were looking for people to fill slots, we've gone to groups.
Okay,
I know that many of them, talking with them, have been,
okay.
but I couldn't tell you that they all have.
Can we just make sure that we're sending a general, as we've been able to open up our vaccination clinics, just to let people know that there's an opportunity to get vaccinated if they so wish?
Absolutely.
Thank you.
And you indicated this is a kind of continuity of government light version of the ordinance. I just wondered, is there anything in it that would cause us to be concerned about if anything should happen to once again worsen the pandemic?
I don't think so, Mr. McGlenn. Some of the things I took out of there, when we did our original one in April of 2020, of course, we had no idea what was going on, and there were 2 full pages, I think, that were necessary at the time, but probably aren't necessary now, that talked about succession management and what would happen if, the county attorney became so afflicted that I couldn't come to work at all. The Virginia Code is very specific as to what my assistant and or deputy can sign. The continuity of government ordinance sort of set that out in a really nice, clear fashion. I don't think we're there, and I thought it was probably a superfluous couple of pages, and then a couple of things that we put in there in April of 2020 that we've never used, went ahead and pulled them out. If it comes that we need that again, I'll come before you in a special meeting and we'll amend it.
Any other questions? All right, I'll
Thank
go
you.
ahead and open up the public hearing. I have the speaker cards, so I'll go ahead and close that public hearing and look for the board.
I'll move the motion.
Motion, okay, Ms. Stevens, will you call the roll, please, sir?
Mr. McGlinnan.
Aye.
Mr. Eisenhower.
Aye.
Ms. Larson.
Aye.
Ms. Sadler.
Aye.
Mr. Hooker.
Aye.
Motion carries.
All right, next, number 3 is Z-20-0006. 8189 and 8193 Richmond Road. Terry, welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the board. Mr. Rob Lang has applied for a rezoning for properties located at 8189 and 8193 Richmond Road. The properties total approximately 2.44 acres and are located just north of Towne Business Center and across the road from Hankins Industrial Park. Previously, this property was rezoned from B1 General Business to B1 General Business with Proffers. The current development, known as Towne Business Center, was also a part of this rezoning. The proposal was approved by the Board of Supervisors in 1997. This proposal is to rezone both B1 properties to M1 Limited Business Industrial with Proffers and to replace the existing B1 Proffers. Both properties are designated general industry. Both properties are designated general industry on the 2035 Comprehensive Plan and Land Use Map and are located within the primary service area. The use proposed with this rezoning is for the construction of a 2-story, approximately 10,000 square foot building for a company that assembles metal parts to fabricate fuel injectors for high performance engines. According to the applicant, the company currently has 4 full-time employees, which includes the owners, and 1 part-time employee. With the proposed proffers, staff finds the proposed use is not expected to have any impacts on adjoining property or the surrounding area with regards to outdoor dust, odor, or noise. The entire operation will be conducted indoors. During a site visit to their existing operation, staff did not notice any evidence of outdoor dust, odors, or noise while the business was in operation. As part of the rezoning to the M1 zoning district, the applicant proposes to limit the other by right uses that could be on site in the future. Letters were sent to all the adjacent property owners, which included all the condo units in the Towne Business Center. Staff received 1 inquiry as to the type of business proposed. Staff finds the proposal to be compatible with surrounding development and consistent with the 2035 Comprehensive Plan and Zoning Ordinance. On March 3rd, 2021, the Planning Commission recommended approval of this application by a vote of 7-0. Staff recommends that the Board of Supervisors approve this application as well as the proposed proffers presented tonight. I'll be happy to answer any questions that you may have, and the applicant is also available. Thank you.
Any questions, Ms. Costello?
Not at this time.
Now this assembling parts, is it plating parts? Do they do any plating like over Greystone, maybe? How they plate their parts?
I believe it's just assembling
Just
pieces of
that's
metal.
all red,
Yes.
fine. I just wanted to check to see, that's just assembly.
Just assembling, yes.
Okay.
Yeah, I guess maybe it's not a question. I guess my biggest concern is that the Towne Business Center is a fairly decent looking piece. And I mean, there is a very large residential neighborhood right up the road. So, you know, it looks as though this is going to be a nice looking building. I just don't want to, you know, just because it's across the street from an industrial park, not have any courtesy to the neighbors up there that are just, I mean, you go a half a mile up the road, you've got a huge neighborhood. So, you know, that would be my biggest concern about it, is that it's a...
It is along a community corridor, so they'll be buffering there. And
Okay.
there's some conditions that,
I did see where you have...
it should mirror the Towne Business Center and look similar to it as far as colors and materials.
Okay, all right, thank you.
All right, any other questions? go ahead and open up, before I open it, our PC right. Jack, how you doing, sir?
Very well, thank you. I can see and I can breathe.
We know what you mean.
Mr. Chairman, members of the board, the Planning Commission unanimously recommends that the board approve this application and the attendant proffers. In addition to the supporting the remarks of Ms. Costello and the staff, we found that this is a good business for the county. It does not have any impacts, any bad impacts on neighboring properties. We did discuss the facade, and it faces Richmond Road, and it is consistent with neighboring properties. There was a brief discussion about the location of the parking, but it too is consistent with ADA requirements and customer entrance. And we were quite comfortable with it. It wasn't a long discussion, and we recommend approval. I'm happy to take any
questions? Thank you for all your hard work. We appreciate it. All right, I'll go ahead and open up the public hearing, and I have no speaker card, so I'll go ahead and close that public hearing and look to the board for direction.
Motion to approve.
Motion to approve. Mr. Stevens, you have a motion to approve? Roll call, please.
Mr. Eisenhower?
Aye.
Ms. Larson?
Aye.
Ms. Sadler?
Aye.
Mr. McGlinnan?
Aye.
Mr. Hippel?
Aye. Motion carries. All right. That puts us in number 4, Z-21-0001, Strawberry Plains Proffer Amendment. Thomas, welcome, sir. How you doing today?
I'm good, how are you?
Very good, sir.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and good evening to the board. Mr. Vernon Getty has applied on behalf of the John Greer Construction Company to amend the existing proffers for 2 parcels to allow several commercial uses currently excluded via the existing proffers. This includes the dry cleaner and laundry use, which is the proposed use of the property for salon cleaners. This property is zoned for limited business with proffers, is located inside the primary service area, and is designated for moderate density residential within the adopted comprehensive plan. Staff finds the proposed proffer amendment would allow for the use of the property to have more options to fulfill the very limited commercial use which is recommended within this land use designation. The dry cleaner use would provide an additional service option for the adjacent neighborhoods in the area, which is also in keeping with the recommendation of the comprehensive plan. This proposal is not projected to generate significant traffic impacts on Strawberry Plains Road, nor is lighting or noise a concern. The applicant has provided 2 additional proffers as part of this proposal. One would be limiting the ingress and egress of the property to the existing location on site, and the other proffer would prohibit outdoor storage throughout the property. At its March 3rd regular meeting, the Planning Commission unanimously recommended approval of this proposal, subject to the proposed proffers. Staff finds this proposal to be compatible with surrounding development and consistent with the adopted comprehensive plan. We do recommend that the board approve this application, subject to the proposed proffers, and I'd be happy to answer any questions you may have, and the applicant is with us tonight as well. Thank you.
Any questions, Thomas?
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
I have one. When the proffers were, the amendment to the proffers will allow the dry cleaners, were there other uses that were originally prohibited that would now be also authorized? In other words, it was a little difficult in reading through the package. You have a long list here and a long list there, and you'd have to do a process of elimination. If you could just give us a quick summary of what other might be allowed, and I guess apparently this is going to take the whole thing for right now, but this proffer change would mean that subsequently something else might be able to go in there.
That's correct.
Okay.
And if you'd like, I can read the list.
If you can, just a short list of what's additional that we, because I couldn't figure that out too easily.
Okay. So the amendment would be restoring those uses that were previously prohibited. And so that would be accessory uses, antique shops, barber and beauty shops, dry cleaners and laundries, gift and souvenir stores, janitorial service establishments, pet stores and pet supply sales, photography, artist and sculpture stores and studios, printing, mailing, lithography, engraving, photocopying, blueprinting, and publishing establishments, that's one use, and security service offices.
Okay.
And so essentially then if the dry cleaner goes in here and subsequently somewhere down the line, they won't move out and somebody else wants, one of those uses could be now put into that property in the future.
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you.
And can I just ask a question? I don't really have any concerns about this particular establishment, and I think obviously this company's had a long local history and has done very well. I'm just kind of interested in the question of, I know dry cleaning does involve chemicals that have to be handled in particular ways. Do you know anything about whether there's going to be any kind of special provision that needs to be made for this particular site in order to address that?
I don't believe there would need to. I would defer that to the applicant though, because they know the ins and outs of the business better than I do.
Thanks.
All right, any other questions? Okay, let's go ahead and open up the public hearing on that. Our first public speaker on that is Mr. Getty. Welcome, Vernon.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Chairman, members of the board, I'm Vernon Getty of 1177 Jamestown Road. It's a great pleasure to be here tonight representing Swan Cleaners. Also here is Mr. Brett Eggleston, the owner of Swan Cleaners and family. You see the building here on Strawberry Plains Road. I'm sure you've driven by it many times, but the property, this building was built in 1950. And it served as a contractor's office and cabinet shop for many years for John Greer Construction and its owner, Joe Carroll. The last successful business in this property was about 5 years ago, and the building's been totally vacant for the last 3 years. I just have a couple photos if you're not familiar with it. Swan Cleaners is a family business in operation here since 1989. As I mentioned, it's owned by Rick Eggleston and his wife and son and 2 daughters all work in the business. They have 5 sites in the community now at McClaw Circle, Quarter Path Crossing right across the street, 5 Forks, Norge, and Tuning Road. This is a great opportunity for them. They can consolidate their cleaning operations. Right now, the dry cleaning is done at Tuning Road, shirts are cleaned and pressed at McClaw Circle, and offices are scattered about in different buildings, and all of that can be consolidated in this location, and it'll also be a pick up and drop off location. We agree with the staff report. These are all low impact businesses that are typically permitted by right in the LB zone. We think this will improve and put this vacant building to a good productive use and certainly be a great help to a good local family business. So we'd ask for you all to approve the case. And Mr. Wood, Rick, you want to speak for a second about your dry cleaning process, if you'd like, John?
If you wouldn't mind.
Yeah.
In the interest of full disclosure, I will announce that I could take my shirts too. Just wanted to- I'm just curious about the use of chemicals in the process and
There is use, and
how they're handled.
DEQ comes in
That's right.
regularly. EPA, everything is regulated. They want to know right down to the ounce of where everything is. We've never had a problem. Chemicals, since I've been in the business, have gotten a lot more economically friendly or ecologically friendly. And we've switched to something that's really not even regulated anymore. But we still use like Safety Clean and these waste people that handle things even though we don't need to. And also, probably, since I've been in the business, it's gone from 10% to about 40% of wet cleaning now, water. And that's increasing all the time. So there's a lot of new solvents out there, and as this pandemic gets over, we'll explore new, but they're nowhere near as bad for the environment as we once were.
Thanks very much.
But everything is applied and regulated.
Yeah, I guess the question, the follow-up question would be with the neighborhood. I mean, there's a funeral home right next door, which I'm sure uses chemicals as well. But in full disclosure, I'm not, if they're gonna move from Five Forks, I don't know if I can vote for this, because I also use Swan at Five Forks. But would the neighbors that are behind, would they be impacted by any chemical smell or anything like that?
No, they would not.
Okay, and then will there be parking there overnight of vehicles since this will sort of be the central location?
Yeah, I would think you would have, yeah.
Richmond,
Food
okay.
trucks.
In the back.
Okay, thank you.
You probably saw that privacy fence in the back.
Yes. Thank you.
Any other questions? All right, Jack, I got us a little mixed up and well, so interested in getting John's question. Come up and please tell us about the planning commission. I apologize for messing that up.
Not a problem. We had an equally short discussion on this matter. We agree on all points with the staff conclusion. The planning commission, in addition, found that this is an adaptive reuse of an empty building, which is a goal of the comprehensive plan. It would support a local family-owned business with local employees, and we unanimously recommend that the board approve this application.
Thank you. Any
Happy
questions?
to take any questions.
No questions?
Thank you.
I should probably just point out that I did speak with Mr. Getty yesterday regarding this application.
How about I move this one?
All right.
Can I add one thing?
Yes, sir.
I did want to say that the proffer that is being offered for prohibiting outdoor storage would help take care of some of that concern of any materials that are outside of the site. So I just did want to mention we have that assurance through the proffers for that potential impact.
Yeah, the site years ago used to have a lot of outside storage.
Yes.
So it's gonna be an improvement, not that the other one's a great company and all that, but they'll be a great improvement.
Great.
Thank you. All right, let's go ahead and close the public comment. Look to the board for
Can I make the motion since it's in my district?
Okay, sure.
Thank you,
Okay.
sir. Now, I do want to say that I look forward to voting for this because it has been an empty building for a while, and this is a great reuse, and I'm only too happy to support it.
Okay. We have a motion. Call roll, Mr. Stevens.
Ms. Sadler?
Aye.
Mr. McGlinnan?
Aye.
Ms. Larson?
Aye.
Mr. Eisenhower?
Aye.
Mr. Hill?
Aye.
Motion carries.
All right, next is SUP-21-0002, James River Elementary School Learning Cottage. Thomas, again. Thank you, sir.
Hello. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and hello again. Mr. Stephen Talley has applied on behalf of the WJCC school system for a special use permit to allow for the installation of one modular learning cottage, which would be for 2 classrooms, at James River Elementary School, which will accommodate up to 50 additional students. This cottage is expected to be in use from the 2021-2022 school year through the 2024-2025 school year. This property is zoned for public lands. It's within the primary service area, and it is designated for federal, state, and county land within the adopted comprehensive plan. Staff does find this proposal compatible with surrounding development and consistent with the comprehensive plan and zoning ordinance. We do recommend that the board approve this application subject to the proposed conditions. I'm happy to answer any questions that you may have, and we do have a representative from the school here tonight as well. Thank you.
Any questions? All right, go ahead and open the public hearing. Have no speaker cards. Close the public hearing. Look to the board for direction.
I'll move for approval of this. My understanding is that this is driven by 2 factors. One is the need to accommodate additional space for reopening schools fully with the still unknown situation with the pandemic. But secondly, that James River Elementary, because of its high free and reduced lunch population, has been targeted by the school board to have lower student-teacher ratios than other schools. So.
Thank you. Okay, we have a motion. Ms. Stevens, would you call the roll, please?
Yes, sir. Ms. Larson?
Aye.
Mr. Mr. Eisenhower?
Aye.
Mr. McGlinnan?
Aye.
Ms. Sadler?
Aye.
Mr. Hill?
Aye.
Motion carries.
All right, next, move into proposal fiscal year 2022 to 2027, secondary six-year plans. Tom? Yes, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the board. Each year, the Virginia Department of Transportation works with James City County Board of Supervisors to develop a list of project priorities for the updated secondary six-year plan. Through the SSYP, the county receives yearly state and federal allocations to fund the proposed secondary improvements. Staff recommends the following priorities that mirror the Board of Supervisors' priorities from FY '21 through '26. The first priority proposed for the SSYP is Phase 1 of the Longhill Road widening, currently underway from Route 199 to Old Town Road. Staff recommends keeping Phase 1 of the project as the first priority. This will ensure the project remains fully funded. The second priority proposed for the SSYP is Croker Road. This project will widen the section of roadway between Richmond Road and the James City County Library. Staff recommends keeping this project as the second priority on the SSYP to ensure the project remains fully funded. The third and fourth priorities proposed for the SSYP are the second and third phases of Longhill Road. No funding has been allocated at this time. In addition, VDOT utilizes a special funding mechanism that provides annual allocations to localities for unpaved roads and bridge projects. For the unpaved road funding program, the priority project is Peach Street. For the bridge funds, the priority project is Hicks Island Road Bridge. Staff recommends adoption of the attached resolution, which endorses the secondary road priority list as set forth in this memo for FY 2022 through 2027 SSYP. I'll be happy to answer any questions you may have. Thank you.
Questions?
Yes, basic question on it. So obviously the first one is the one that's ongoing right now, Longhill Phase 1. And then Croker Road, which is coming up fairly quickly. But you mentioned that Longhill Phase 2 and Phase 3, although they're in the plan, they don't have any money designated for them. Is the object to put them in there so that if money becomes available, we could then start accumulating money for those two particular projects?
I believe that's correct. May I ask Paul to
Okay.
clarify a little more?
And the reason I ask this is because there's one other project that we've talked about with VDOT, which is out there somewhere, but it's also a fairly high priority, and maybe even a higher priority than Phase 3 of Longhill, and that's the Airport Road congestion choke point that we've talked about.
Yes.
So, and I noticed that's not in here at all. What was the thought process and how we arrived at this particular one, and how it may change that in the future if we needed to do something?
Sure, I certainly think so. As you all will, good evening, Mr. Chairman. As you kind of get focused, can't focus on too many things at once, just like Mr. Haldeman. So as you all have seen very frequently, this is an annual process, and so it gives the board a lot of flexibility. Can certainly revisit this list at any point. The reason why Longhill Road Phase 2 and Phase 3 are on here, really quite simply, it's because they were on in years past. We're on the cusp of having a new comprehensive plan. The transportation chapter was provided to you all last month. We have a new transportation model coming out. We have an updated analysis from the TPO that's going to give us a lot of clarity on projects moving forward. So I think that's going to absolutely start to give us an opportunity to revisit the list. One of the things that I mentioned last time was these sorts of funds are just so limited. It's $213,000 a month. There's just not a whole lot to do with this particular pot of money. The more exciting opportunity I think that the board is creating is with some additional funds in the transportation match, because those can easily be automatically doubled as part of a rev share application, or there's an 80% chance to increase those funds by 80% for bike and ped projects, and so there's just a lot more flexibility. So you can turn that $250,000 into $500,000 right away, for example. And the timing is very good for that because the rev share applications and the TAP applications open up this summer. This is a non-smart scale year. Both of them sort of do every other year type of things. For projects as large as Longhill Road Phase 2 and for Airport Road and Richmond Road, this isn't the source of funding that's ever going to do anything for those. Airport Road and Richmond Road's a $12 million project. The reason also why we left, I'm remembering now, the reason why we also left Longhill Road Phase 2 on there is because as part of the community-driven corridor study, there was a list of quick hitter items. So, obviously the full cost to expand the road is going to be a lot of money. We do have a list of quick hitter items on there that cost significantly less that will get us through whenever we can find funding to do the full road widening. There was a list of smaller interim level projects. And so this funding, we could start to peel off some of those. There is some smaller work. We've still got to do a planning exercise to figure out what's going on with the entries to Seasons Trace and Lafayette High School to kind of figure out. That was the one piece of the corridor study. There was not citizen consensus. There was 9 different alternatives I think we identified. We still got to figure out what we've got to do there. So we have some time there, but certainly if there are striping improvements, signage improvements, all of those things on Longhill Phase 2, this relatively small amount of funding will help us do that, especially if we need another engineering study. So a little bit of a long-winded response to you, but just hopefully
Very
Oh,
provide some
helpful.
context.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
Can I vote no in protest? Because I'm
I might
so
join you.
frustrated and just because, anyway, it's fine. But I do think another problem that we definitely have something cooking, and I know it gets very complicated because I think it's the city of Williamsburg, but the traffic is coming from James City County, is 199 and Jamestown Road. When I turned to come here today at 4, and the backup was incredible. But this amount of money is not going to take care of that. So I'm just putting it out there with my intersection that'll never see any money. But anyway. Well, I shouldn't say that. We just got a few things done, and
That's right.
it was very inexpensive.
Never
but
say never.
that's
We'll find
right.
a way.
Yes. So
I feel your pain.
thank you. I appreciate it.
Any other questions? All right, go ahead and open up the public hearing. No speaker cards. Close the public hearing. Look for the board.
I'll move the motion.
Motion is moved. Mr. Stevens, you call roll, please.
Yes, sir. Mr. McGlinnan.
Aye.
Ms. Sadler.
Aye.
Mr. Eisenhower.
Aye.
Ms. Larson.
Aye.
Mr. Hippel.
Aye.
Motion carries.
All right, number 7, lease of real estate property at 5249 Old Town Road, lease agreement with the Williamsburg Area Medical Assistance Corporation. Liz, welcome.
Yes, good morning, Mr. Chair, good evening, sorry. Mr. Chairman, members of the board, before you is a resolution authorizing the county administrator to execute a new lease for operation of the Old Town Medical and Dental Center, and that's in a portion of our human services building. The current lease executed in 2016 expires June 30 of this year, and Old Town has asked to enter into a new 3-year lease agreement while they search for a new location. Administration has negotiated rent at $120,000 for the first year with an annual 10% increase thereafter. The lease does permit Old Town to terminate the lease on 30 days notice in the event that they find a location prior to the 3-year timeline, and it also allows the county to terminate upon their defaults. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Questions?
How is the 10% per year determined?
That was negotiated by administration, and we felt that right now the rent was pretty below market. We certainly want to incentivize them to search for a new location, as our social services department needs extra space as well.
Any other questions? All right, go ahead and open up the public hearing.
Move the motion.
All right, Mrs. Stevens, would you call roll, please, sir?
Yes, sir. Ms. Larson?
Aye.
Mr. Eisenhower?
Aye.
Ms. Sadler?
Aye.
Mr. McLennan?
Aye.
Mr. Hill?
Aye. Motion carries. Number 8, lease agreement, cell tower at 5301 Longhill Road. John, welcome, sir.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. Before you have a memo and a resolution to approve, amend the lease for the cell tower at the rec center. And you may not even notice it, it's on one of the light poles out there. Right now, it's generating, I think it's one of the highest in the county, generating approximately $90,000 a year in revenue. And this is gonna increase the space at the bottom of the tower by 136 square feet so they can place some boxes, and our monthly lease payment will increase by approximately $393 for that. So it'll add another $4,000 to the annual payment for the use of that cell tower. If you have any questions on it, it will not have any impact on the field, the spectators, or visibility, so.
Will it talk to people's COVID vaccines?
But,
Just kidding. Is that a good, the additional 393, do you feel like that is a good amount? Could we have gotten more, or are you satisfied with that?
I'm sure Mr. Kinsman negotiated the best deal he could.
Okay. Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Any other questions? All right, we'll go ahead and open the public hearing. Seeing no speaker cards, close it, look for the board for direction.
Move approval.
Move for approval. Mrs. Stevens, call roll, please, sir.
Ms. Larson?
Aye.
Mr. McLennan?
Aye.
Ms. Sadler?
Aye.
Mr. Eisenhower?
Aye.
Mr. Hill?
Aye.
Motion carries.
Now, at this point, since I don't see any of the public in there, look, I would like to go ahead and close our meeting out, go into closed session, finish our meeting, and then go to the service authority. If there was people out here that were gonna speak for the budget, I don't see any, so I would think we just close ours out. Y'all okay with it? Jay's leaving.
Okay.
You good?
Yep.
Okay, all right, if we're good with that, then I'll look for a motion to go in closed session and consider for the accusation of an interest in real estate property along Ironbound Road pursuing a section 2.2-3711A3 of the Code of Virginia, discussion of the awards of a public contract for the use of Ambler House at Jamestown Beach Event Park, including discussions in term and scope of such contract when discussing an open session would adversely affect the bargaining position and negotiating strategy of the public body pursuant of section 2.2-3711A29 of the Code of Virginia. All right, have a motion on that. Ms. Stevens, you call roll, please, sir.
Yes, sir. Ms. Sadler?
Aye.
Mr. Eisenhower?
Aye.
Ms. Larson?
Aye.
Mr. McLennan?
Aye.
Mr. Hill?
Aye. All right.
Can we take a 2-second or 2-minute break for the restroom? Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
She's aware.
Here with an Afghan in the minute rest.
Pack warm in a blanket,
Yeah.
not to snag it.
All right, so good. All right, we'll go ahead and come out of closed session and do certifications.
Chairman, I move to certify that we only spoke about those items we indicated to speak about going into closed session.
Thank you. Mr. Stevens, call the roll, please.
Yes, sir. Ms. Sadler?
Aye.
Mr. Eisenhower?
Aye.
Ms. Larson?
Aye.
Mr. McGlinnan?
Aye.
Mr. Hippel?
Aye.
Motion carries.
All right. We've covered everything. Any actions resulting in the closed session that we need to discuss? Y'all got everything you need?
No, sir, we do. Thank you.
Okay. All right, next we'll look for an adjournment until 1 p.m. on April 27th, 2021 for a regular business meeting.
So moved.
So moved. All right. Roll call, please, sir.
Ms. Sadler?
Aye.
Mr. Eisenhower?
Aye.
Ms. Larson?
Aye.
Mr. McGlinnan?
Aye.
Mr. Hippel?
Aye. Meeting adjourned.
Call this meeting of the James City Service Authority Board of Directors to order. Good evening, Mr. Powell.
Good evening.
Would you call the roll, please?
Ms. Sadler.
Here.
Mr. Eisenhower.
Here.
Mr. McGlinnan.
Here.
Mr. Hippel.
Here.
Ms. Larson.
Here. We have an emergency contract award and closed session. Is that, we're going to address that later?
Yes,
Sorry.
yes, ma'am. I'm recommending the addition of 2 items to the
Thank
agenda.
you.
One is an emergency contract award for the Route 5 water main replacement. The other is a closed session. Based on your policies, the board needs to vote to approve
Amend the
the amended
agenda.
agenda to include those 2 items
Move
before we
the
proceed.
amended agenda.
Sorry, I was having a moment.
That's great.
If you'll call the roll, please.
Ms. Adler?
Aye.
Mr. Eisenhower?
Aye.
Mr. McGlinnan?
Aye.
Mr. Hippel?
Aye.
Ms. Larson?
Aye. We have no presentations. Is there any public comment?
No, ma'am.
All right. Consent calendar. Tonight, our consent calendar consists of minutes adoption. May I have a motion to approve the consent calendar?
Motion for approval?
Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. We have a public hearing on fiscal year 2022 James City Service Authority budget. Mr. Powell, you'll give the staff presentation.
Good evening. It's my pleasure to present the proposed FY22 James City Service Authority budget and capital improvement program. This is the first year that the authority's budget is presented as a separate budget from the county's budget. As you know, the authority relies solely on user fees to fund its budget and does not receive any funding from the county. And our budget consists of 2 funds, a water fund and a sewer fund. The authority's budget this year focuses on 4 major issues: sustainable long-term water supply, modernizing aging infrastructure, facilities and technology, succession management and the recruitment and retention of employees, and regulatory compliance. This chart shows the FY21 adopted budget, the original FY22 plan, and the FY22 proposed. As you can see, the FY22 budget is substantially lower than the FY21 budget. This slide shows the major differences from the current fiscal year budget to the proposed, and the main reason for the difference in the budgets, the main reason that this year's budget is so much higher than next year's is the bond that you approved in the amount of $9 million to fund the 2 neighborhood improvement projects. The proposed FY22 budget also uses unrestricted reserves in the sewer fund to supplement a repair and replacement fund, and also uses those funds to help fund certain capital projects. It includes additional revenue as a result of an incremental rate increase that was recommended by a rate study conducted last year. In addition, the budget funds recommendations from the recruitment and retention study and includes 4 new positions. 2 of these positions, a water quality specialist and a water production maintenance mechanic, will help address regulatory requirements that are being imposed on public water providers. Another position, the building technician, will assist to maintain the 108 facilities that the authority owns. And another position, a human resources analyst, was recommended by the aforementioned recruitment and retention study to assist with human resources activities. Lastly, there are several areas where our revenue is expected to be less than the current year. The authority received CARES Act funds in FY21 to assist customers who became delinquent due to COVID-related hardships. Those funds will not be received this year. Water facility revenue, which are the fees that are paid by new development, is anticipated to be less, and interest revenue is projected to decline. This slide summarizes the proposed revenues and expenses. As I mentioned earlier, our revenues come solely from user fees, the vast majority of which are the service fees, but based on customers' usage. Our largest expense is personnel, but we also have 6.3 million in operating costs, $1.9 million in debt service, and $3.9 million for capital projects. Before I discuss the proposed rates, I wanted to highlight that water use is decreasing over time, almost 17% over the last 10 years. The authority promotes conservation, and we view the declining water demand as a positive trend. However, as with any utility, the vast majority of our expenses are fixed, thereby creating some fiscal challenges, especially in the face of increasing costs due to aging infrastructure and the need for an alternative water supply.
Was that monthly per household, or is that what is the 7,000? That's the total. That's a total amount. It's because on the left it's 8,442 times 10,000. So those are annual figures in terms of system production. So it's not only the case that we are seeing decreasing use per household, but we've got more citizens now, so that it's really a much more dramatic drop, I would think, per household.
It's interesting. I would not have predicted this trend a few years ago, and we all assumed that at some point it's gonna bottom out and it'll start going back up. But it has been in decline more than I would have predicted a few years ago. And we attribute that to several things. One is the smart appliances. We do think people are becoming more astute about those types of things and incorporating them into their house. I think that the rate structures are helping to discourage water use, and I think that while irrigation is still a big component of our overall demand, it appears to be decreasing at least to some degree. So I think it's a combination of factors that are contributing to this trend.
I figured it was my son looking at it and not taking those showers.
That probably has something to do with it too.
Yeah.
For all of us.
Don's got a good point there. It'd be neat to know with the decline at 17% and our growth rate at X%, the difference in that number on a chart to see, where you would think that with our growth, there might be a flat line. But even with us growing more demand, we're still going down and decreased number of 17% over.
Yeah, the number here says 14% increase in population, 17% decrease in use.
Right.
Wow.
That's a big number. Yeah.
The proposed budget includes a 3.5% increase in water rates in each of the 4 tiers, and recommends no change in sewer rates for FY22, again as recommended by the rate study. I'm not going to read every number on this slide, but as an example, the rate in the first tier would increase from $3.62 per 1,000 gallons to $3.75 per 1,000 gallons, and the monthly fixed charge on a 5/8 inch meter would increase from $5.23 per month to $5.41 per month. As a result of the proposed rate changes, a typical 5,000 gallons per month user would see their bill increase from $43.84 to $44.77, which is a 93-cent increase for a 2.1% increase. If these charges are adopted, the authority would still have the lowest water bill and the 3rd lowest water and sewer combined bill in the Hampton Roads region for the typical 5,000 gallon a month user. Before I conclude, I wanted to highlight a few of the specific actions the proposed budget includes to address the 4 focus areas. First is sustainable water supply. The budget contributes funds to an alternative water supply reserve fund that's been established to fund an alternative water supply project once it's identified. The budget also continues the practice of promoting conservation through the increasing block 4-tier rate structure. We have several projects intended to modernize our infrastructure, including the neighborhood improvement projects I mentioned earlier, as well as renovation to one of our lift stations. Also included are several technology enhancements to our software, communication systems, and meter reading process. The budget also includes a contribution to a repair and replacement fund and creates the aforementioned building technician position. With regard to succession management, I've already mentioned the recruitment and retention study, but specifically the study recommends a 1-grade increase for most authority employees and a longevity adjustment, one-time longevity adjustment for employees who've been with the authority for 10 years or more. The budget also includes a 3% general wage increase and the aforementioned HR analyst to manage new recruitment and retention activities. And finally, for the last of our 4 focus areas, regulatory compliance, the budget recommends funding the recommendations of a corrosion control study. It funds the ongoing requirements from a consent agreement that applies to our sewer system. And it funds the 2 positions that were mentioned earlier to help with compliance issues that include a new lead and copper rule and the corrosion control initiatives. That finalizes my presentation. The last slide is the budget calendar, which is the same as the counties. I would be happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you. Any questions? Okay, with that, open the public hearing. Do we have any speakers? Any speakers for the public? Okay, seeing none, close the public hearing. And no action is required this evening, but thank you very much.
Okay, thank you.
All right, with that, we move to board considerations. Contract award, lift station, 3-3, pipe bridge upgrade, $386,317. Mr. Powell, you're going to give the presentation?
Yes, thank you. Service Authority has an existing 8-inch ductile iron gravity sewer pipe that runs parallel to Jamestown Road and is supported by a pipe bridge across Lake Powell. Approximately 570 feet of the pipe on the bridge and 165 feet underground require replacement due to interior corrosion. An invitation for bid was publicly advertised, and 1 bid was received. Harry Branscombe LLC was determined to be the lowest responsive and responsible bidder. They have successfully completed work for us in the past. Staff recommends approval of the resolution awarding the contract to Henry S. Branscombe LLC in the amount of $386,317.
Thank you. Look to the board for any discussion or motion.
Motion for approval.
Can I just ask a quick question? Was that within the expected budget amount for this project?
It is, yes, yes.
All right, thank you. There's a motion. Mr. Powell, you'll call the roll.
Ms. Sadler?
Aye.
Mr. Eisenhower?
Aye.
Mr. McGlinnan?
Aye.
Mr. Hippel?
Aye.
Ms. Larson?
Aye. With that, contract award, annual services for installation and removal of submersible well pump assemblies and related work. Mr. Powell?
Five Forks Water Treatment Plant has 3 Lower Potomac and 2 Middle Potomac wells with submersible pump and motor assemblies. They're hundreds of feet underground. Repair or replacement work requires specialized equipment and services. An RFP was publicly advertised for qualified and experienced firms to perform this work. 1 proposal was received from AC Schultes, who have successfully completed work for the Service Authority in the past. Staff recommends approval of the resolution awarding the contract to AC Schultes. The initial term of the contract is 2 years with 6 possible 1-year renewals.
Thank you. To the board for any discussion?
This is just awarding them the contract, if a well replacement exceeds a certain dollar amount, it has to come back to the board.
That is correct,
Okay.
yes. And when we've had that before,
Yes.
this is the company we've had on contract previously.
I remember when we had to do that.
Yeah.
All right, is there a motion?
Motion for approval.
Thank you. Mr. Powell?
Ms. Sadler?
Aye.
Mr. Eisenhower?
Aye.
Mr. McGlinnan?
Aye.
Mr. Hippel?
Aye.
Ms. Larson?
Aye. That brings us to contract award custodial services. Mr. Powell?
JCSA and the county issued an RFP for custodial services. 6 proposals were received. An evaluation committee selected Rock Solid Janitorial LLC as the most qualified firm. They've successfully completed work for JCSA in the past. Staff recommends approval of the resolution awarding the contract to Rock Solid LLC. Initial term of this contract is 1 year with 4 possible 1-year renewals.
Thank you. Look to the board for any questions, discussion, and a motion.
Motion.
Thank you. Mr. Powell?
Ms. Sadler?
Aye.
Mr. Eisenhower?
Aye.
Mr. McGlinnan?
Aye.
Mr. Hippel?
Aye.
Ms. Larson?
Aye, thank you. So emergency purchase contract award, Route 5 water main replacement, $582,500. Mr. Powell?
An 18-inch water main along Route 5, just west of the Five Forks Water Treatment Plant, broke in March. Due to the approximate 30-foot depth of the broken pipe and its location, it cannot be repaired. In consultation with the purchasing office, an emergency invitation for bids was solicited. While no customers are currently out of service, the replacement of this pipe is deemed an emergency due to concerns that water pressure could be affected west of the Green Springs Plantation Road, Jamestown High School area, particularly as spring and summer peak season and irrigation season approaches. Reduced pressures can negatively affect fire pressures and just the overall level of service to customers. Approximately 900 feet of pipe will be replaced. About 80 feet of the pipe replacement will be a free-spanning pipe bridge to cross the Powhatan Creek instead of installing the pipe under the creek. We estimated this work can be completed within 3 months. A couple of other things I would mention. Mr. McGlennon, you had asked about redundancy. We believe that by converting this from an underground pipe under the creek to putting it as a pipe bridge, it will be easier to repair in the future if it's deemed necessary. So I believe that really takes the redundancy issue away. So we think by changing the way we're crossing the creek, that we don't need another redundant line. 2 bids were received, and Henry S. Branscombe LLC was determined to be the lowest responsive and responsible bidder. They've successfully completed work for us in the past. Staff recommends approval of the resolution awarding the contract to Henry S. Branscombe LLC in the amount of $582,500.
Is there any discussion?
Motion for approval.
Thank you. Mr. Powell?
Ms. Sadler?
Aye.
Mr. Eisenhower?
Aye.
Mr. McGlinnan?
Aye.
Mr. Hippel?
Aye.
Ms. Larson?
Aye. With that, we need to enter a motion to enter into closed session for discussion or consideration of the investment of public funds related to a water supply agreement with the City of Newport News where competition or bargaining is involved, where, if made public initially, the financial interest of the JCSA would be adversely affected pursuant to Section 2.2-3711A6 of the Code of Virginia. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Thank you. Mr. Powell?
Ms. Sadler?
Aye.
Mr. Eisenhower?
Aye.
Mr. McGlinnan?
Aye.
Mr. Hippel?
Aye.
Ms. Larson?
Aye.
He's
You're back.
Yeah, don't say that on camera. He's been
Yeah,
very
please don't.
helpful. Okay, that's right. Okay, we're back. It's me. All right, we need a certification that we only spoke what we were supposed to in closed session.
Move to certify we only spoke about those items we indicated we'd speak about.
Thank you. Mr. Powell?
Ms. Sadler?
Aye.
Ms. Reisner?
Aye.
Mr. McGlinnan?
Aye.
Mr. Hippel?
Aye.
Ms. Larson?
Aye. Board requests and directives.
Had a quick one, just wanted to know what the status of the CARES Act relief funding is? Or you don't have to give it to me tonight if you
Okay.
you want to just send me something.
Okay,
Send us
okay.
something.
I will say though, I don't remember the exact number, but we are probably somewhere around a third or 40% of our total allocation at this point, which is really less than where I thought we would be. So we've got some work to do to try and get that out. It leads to another conversation, which is, I'll just mention this briefly and we just can discuss this further later, but at the regional level, the local utility directors are starting to talk about getting back to a point where we do start cutting water off if for non-payment. And you know, ideally, we would all like to try to do it at about the same time. I don't know if that's really going to be feasible or not, but that's what we're talking about. And I do believe. I do believe that if we start turning water off, that we will, that those funds will get expended. Because the utilization has not been as high as I really anticipated.
What's the deadline now for?
It's the end of the calendar year, so we
Okay.
do have some time.
Great.
Thank you. With that, we will go to General Manager's update, our April dashboard report.
Yeah, I have no additional update beyond the dashboard.
Okay. Any questions on that?
Very useful.
All right.
Very good.
With that, take a motion to adjourn until 1 p.m. on April 27, 2021 for the budget work session.
Motion.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Any nays? Thank you. Adjourned.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.